This is Dave McCain with the Right Tree Genealogy, doing part 3 of the Getting Started in Genealogy series. So going forward, what do I believe? Okay, you came into this with part 1 is what do I know, and part 2 was what do I want to know. Now what? That's where we are on this. After completing some interviews and record searches, we need to decide what to believe. Not every story we hear or family fact is fact. Some are literally lore of the family, and others are real and can be documented, and we need to find documents to find those. Next is, this is what you got to do as a researcher. You go to find primary sources, and primary sources, original documents, original statements. For instance, you'll see an order book in the records for at a courthouse, for instance, and it's an order book entry. It is not the original source. It is a secondary source. Let me put myself up in the top corner here and continue on so that you can see this better. You want original documents, so original wills, primary sources, first person information. And that's, for instance, if you look back on one of the records I showed before. Now that we step back, this is a page from part 2 of the video. A particular individual actually filled this sheet out. It was, as I was describing there, you can gain information from different sources if you go to different family activities and gatherings. Well, this person told me their birth date and where they were born. That's first person information. Okay, and they listed who their mother and their father were. So that's first person type of information. Now that we've seen that, and we're stepping back forward here, I always want to verify your source and family connections before adding them, okay? And that's, I think I like this better on this. So you have records that someone told you, you interviewed them, and they said, well, our family lived in Bracken County, Kentucky, and they got married there, I believe, and then they ended up here where we're at now. You want to look for, always verify a source. If this, for instance, is your aunt that heard the story from their dad, that's second person story type thing. Their dad said, well, I lived in Mason County, Kentucky, and Rowan County, Kentucky, and told these stories. Well, it's being relayed by the child of the person, so it's relatively believable, and they should know if their parents are telling the story, this is what dad said type of thing. You log that. Well, if you can go look for census records and those type things, you're helping verify a source information that you have. And then I've got an example coming up next is going to talk about this more in detail. Before you connect somebody to a tree, you make sure you have record sources. You don't say it's not valid, and you don't say it's invalid. You want to use it as a piece of puzzle to disprove or prove. If you can prove what you see in that posting with other documents, then that's great that you found that. It's a post without a source, but it doesn't mean it's not valid. When you're interviewing somebody and they tell you something, it's a first person information, as I state at the top of this page here. You still want to find records to help support what they've told you. Without sources or supporting documents, it is only a working hypothesis. I've worked a long time on my genealogy, and one thing I want to point out here is there's still some working hypotheses after almost 40 years of research. Sometimes you have to, and there's other people that present that you look at negative confirmation. If you can prove a family lineage, and actually this document is going to kind of come with that as well. If you can show a lineage, you think it's one thing, but you're finding documentation that says the other, then it's still evidence for you to use in your records to put someone down, to document them in your family tree. Let me go back up in the corner here and go to the next piece of this. Here's a real research example. Back in 1998, and I'll actually specify it here, it's blocked up here in the corner. I posted this post, this is from me, April 14th, 1998, and it says at 8 a.m. That's interesting, just flat out at 8 a.m. So this is a Roots Web message that I posted back at that time. I was posting on message boards before you have what we have today. You had these message boards, you have Facebook and other sources now you can post on in the forums. But this is something we did back in that time. Now, what I want to state here is caution, just because it makes sense or it's easy doesn't make it correct. I stated at that time, and we'll just go ahead and go to the next one, and it is believed that he, meaning James McCain, is the grandson of Samuel McCain. Okay? It makes sense. Samuel McCain married Nancy Heverin, and they got married in 1818. And it makes sense that they have a child named Nancy because his wife's name is Nancy. However, this is not correct information. When you're pulling together records, you want to continue looking. Just because you have this is something to write down. You can write down that this James McCain was born in this date, which has been validated. He married Mary Ellen Sainks, which has been validated. She's the daughter of John V. Sainks and Mary Ellen Tennis, which has been validated. So this information right here, all the way to this point, has been validated. It doesn't invalidate the rest of the information just because something else may be incorrect. It does say believed. I posted this in 1998, and I say believed to be. And at that time, I didn't have documents to disprove that that was the case. So you need to continue to look for records. Fade myself out for a split second here, and read this phrase. As can be seen on these two records, Samuel and Nancy Heverin had a daughter named Margaret, not Nancy. There are additional records including marriage and censuses that support Margaret versus Nancy. Let me put myself back up in the corner there. So this is a family Bible record, and I received a copy of the family Bible from an individual, and this is what it says here. When he gave this to me, it was after that 1998 post of the original record I showed. And it says, now a lot of people can't read old script here, but down in this corner it says, Margaret Ann McCain was born July the 26th, 1819. Okay, so in this birth section of it, it says when Samuel was born, when Nancy was born, his wife, and when their first child born was Margaret, and this is when she was born. Over here is a family group sheet from LDS, Latter-day Saints, or Family Search as it's called today, and I voiced that in the last video. This is a group sheet started in 1939 by the record I see on it itself. Family members, a person that was doing research at the time. Again, they have Margaret in this archived record of family group sheet from basically a few generations back to what our research is. What I want to say there is when you first start with an information, and let's go back here, the first information was this was what was believed, and it made sense because of the names and everything, and it was easy. But you got to keep researching to give yourself a better answer. So before I do the conclusions, I want to say that this was a quick video series. This was for introduction and possibly intermediate people, kind of hitting you with things that you could possibly find, and don't stop looking. You may find that record you're really looking for. It's okay to put a person into a record as a hypothesis, or actively researching like on Ancestry. You can post it that way. But make sure you note the person as that, so that when someone finds your record or you're talking to someone else, basically what can happen, one person's hypothesis can turn into another person's reality, and it turns into this is what it is. Try to be careful what you add to your tree, because other people may take that as the valid sourcing and go forward with it. If someone contacts you and says, hey, I see you have this person in there, be ready to say, hey, I also have a marriage record for this, I just don't have it on that website, or I found additional notations in a will or something like that I just don't have out there. Because the more records you have, then the better you can look at your family tree and say, this is what it really is. Go back to my lowercase in the corner. Find primary sources. Look for original first person records, as I pointed out before. This is conclusion here. Original records to validate information you've gotten from interviews or from other people, or even those unsourced records. Always verify a source and family connection before adding them. If you went ahead and added that, if you went ahead up here and added Samuel McCain to your record as the father of Nancy, and then in turn the grandfather of James, you would have been incorrect if you just went straight to do it. So make sure you validate the information before you add them. And then I also want to make a note that is not always discussed. Never assume an unsourced record is valid or invalid, okay? Just consider it a piece of the puzzle to prove or disprove. Like I had in that one, there's a lot of information that was provided here, and I'm going to go back to it again. James McCain, valid, this is valid. James McCain, when he was born, his wife's name, and when they got married and where, and her parents' names. This is not sourced on this record reference that I have there. So it may not be sourced, but it's still valid. But it's good you now want to go after those records. Thank you for watching this video series, and I hope that you have learned something from this. I've added some videos here at the top you might be interested in, and you can always subscribe over here if you're interested. Let's continue learning together.